The legend of the Headless Horseman of Bakersfield in the arid plains of the San Joaquin Valley, where Bakersfield was but a fledgling settlement, whispers of a ghastly figure grew among the settlers. It began one stifling summer night in 1853, when a group of ranchers claimed to have seen a ghostly rider galloping across the moonlit expanse near Kern River, the sound of hooves echoing like a thunder. The rider was no ordinary man. Draped in tattered black garments, he clutched the reins of a spectral black stallion that moved with an unearthly speed. But it wasn't the sight of the horseman that chilled the spine, it was the absence of his head. The origin of the curse the legend traced back to Diego Alvarez, a vaquero who once worked the sprawling lands of the Rancho El Tejon. Diego was a proud man, known for his exceptional skill with a lasso and his fiery temper. But his life was forever altered by a land dispute with a wealthy rancher named Elias M.C. Cafferty. McCafferty had used forged documents to claim Diego's lands, leaving Diego destitute. Diego vowed revenge. One stormy night, he rode to M.C. Cafferty estate, intent on reclaiming what was his. The confrontation turned violent. In the ensuing scuffle, M.C. Cafferty killed Diego with a swift, brutal strike of a machete, severing his head in the process. M.C. Cafferty buried the body in haste, but the head was never recovered. Days later, M.C. Cafferty's servants reported hearing the sound of galloping hooves outside the estate. The rancher dismissed their fears until he, too, heard the phantom rider one night. M.C. Cafferty fled Bakersfield, abandoning his ill-gotten land. The sightings of the Headless Horseman soon became a dark legend, passed from one settler to another. A haunting in the fields in 1853, the growing settlement of Bakersfield was a magnet for prospectors and ranchers seeking fortune and fertile land. Among them was a young woman named Clara Whitmore, a schoolteacher from Missouri. She had heard the stories but dismissed them as superstitious nonsense. One evening, Clara was riding home after visiting a neighboring homestead. As twilight deepened, a strange unease settled over her. The wind grew still, and the chirping of crickets ceased. Then she heard Ita's distant gallop, growing louder and faster. Clara turned her horse toward the riverbank, hoping to lose whoever pursued her. But as she glanced back, she saw him, the Headless Horseman, his cloak billowing like black smoke in the wind. In his hand, he held a jagged machete, its blade gleaming in the dim light. Terrified, Clara urged her horse to move faster. She reached the river and plunged into its waters. The spectral stallion halted at the riverbank, rearing back as if the water itself repelled it. The horseman turned, his headless form scanning the horizon before vanishing into the night. The aftermath Clara survived to tell her tale, and her account reignited the legend. Over time, settlers began to leave small offerings near the river candles, coins, and even scraps of food to appease the restless spirit of Diego Alvarez. Some say the horseman still rides when the moon is high, searching for his missing hat or perhaps seeking justice for the wrongs done to him. Those who venture too far into the Bakersfield plains at night claim to hear the rhythmic beat of ghostly hooves and feel the chilling presence of the rider who can never rest. Even now, on quiet nights near the Kern River, some swear they see a dark figure galloping in the distance, a reminder that the past never truly fades in the land of the living. Diego Alvarez, Life and Tragedy. Diego Alvarez was born in 1815 in a modest adobe home near the coast of Alta California, long before it became part of the United States. Oh! His parents were vaqueros themselves, skilled horsemen who worked the vast ranchos of Spanish settlers. From a young age, Diego displayed a natural affinity for riding and an uncanny ability to command even the wildest of horses. By the time he was 16, he was already known as one of the finest vaqueros in the region. His name spoken with respect in the dusty cantinas of the San Joaquin Valley. The land of his dreams in 1839. Diego's hard work bore fruit when he saved enough to claim a parcel of fertile land near what would one day become Bakersfield. He named it Rancho Esperanza, or Ranch of Hope. The land was rich with opportunity, its fields teeming with promise, and Diego poured his soul into it. He planted orchards, raised cattle, and built a sturdy adobe home where he dreamed of one day raising a family. Diego was not a wealthy man, but he was proud. His success came not from silver or gold, but from sweat and determination. For over a decade, Rancho Esperanza thrived, and Diego's reputation grew not just as a skilled vaquero, but also as a man of integrity and kindness. He would often share food and shelter with weary travelers passing through the valley, his generosity earning him the loyalty of many. The shadow of greed by the early 1850, the gold rush had transformed California into a land of chaos and greed. Speculators and opportunists flooded the region, hungry for wealth and land. Among them was Elias M.C. Cafferty, a cunning and ruthless rancher from back east. Muck Cafferty saw the growing value of the San Joaquin Valley and began buying up large tracts of land, sometimes fairly, but often through intimidation or fraud. When M.C. Cafferty set his sights on Rancho Esperanza, Diego refused to sell, standing firm in defense of his home. "This land is my soul," he told M.C. Cafferty during a heated confrontation. "You cannot buy a man's soul." Unwilling to take no for an answer, M.C. Cafferty forged documents claiming ownership of the rancho and presented them to a corrupt local magistrate. With the law on his side, M.C. Cafferty arrived with armed men to evict Diego from the land he had built with his own hands. A fatal night, Diego was not a man to back down, even in the face of injustice. On a stormy night in 1853, he rode to M.C. Cafferty's estate to confront the rancher and demand the return of his property. Witnesses later recounted hearing the sounds of a heated argument, followed by the clash of steel and a scream that tore through the rain-soaked darkness. When M.C. Cafferty emerged from the fray, he was alone. Diego Alvarez was never seen alive again. The story goes that M.C. Cafferty had struck him down with a machete, severing his head in the process. Fearing retribution, M.C. Cafferty hastily buried Diego's body in an unmarked grave near the Kern River, but he could not find Diego's head in the chaos of the storm. The birth of a curse, Mick Cafferty's crime did not go unnoticed. Strange events began almost immediately. His cattle grew sick, his crops withered, and his workers deserted him, terrified by eerie sounds and ghostly apparitions. One night, Mick Cafferty himself was pursued by a headless figure on horseback, forcing him to flee the region entirely. Diego's headless form, now a ghostly rider, was said to roam the land he had fought to protect, seeking either his missing head or justice for the wrongs done to him. Legacy, though, Diego Alvarez's life ended in tragedy. His story became a legend that shaped the identity of the Bakersfield region. His spirit remains a symbol of resilience and justice, a reminder of the price paid by those who stood their ground against greed and corruption. And so, under the vast Californian skies, Diego Alvarez's name is still whispered, carried on the wind, as the Headless Horseman rides across the plains he once called home.
Diego Alvarez meets Joaquin Murrieta. The year was 1852, a year before Diego Alvarez's tragic demise, when he crossed paths with one of California's most notorious yet romanticized figures, Joaquin Murrieta, the so-called Robin Hood of El Dorado. At that time, Diego was still the proud owner of Rancho Esperanza, and Joaquin Murrieta was a wanted man, hunted by vigilantes and lawmen alike. A fateful encounter, it was a warm autumn evening when Diego first met Joaquin. Diego had spent the day mending fences along the eastern border of his land when he spotted a group of riders approaching in the distance. Cautious but curious, he rode out to meet them. As the group drew closer, Diego saw that they were rough-looking men, their clothes dusty and their faces weathered. But the man leading them stood a young, wiry figure with piercing dark eyes and an air of quiet authority. "I mean no trouble," the man said, tipping his wide-brimmed sombrero. "We're travelers, seeking rest and water for our horses. My name is Joaquin." Diego immediately recognized the name. Stories of Joaquin Murrieta had spread like wildfire throughout California. Some called him a hero who fought against the oppression of Mexican settlers by American authorities. Others called him an outlaw, a bandit who robbed and killed indiscriminately. Diego, however, believed the truth lay somewhere in between. "Joaquin Murrieta," Diego said, his tone neither hostile nor welcoming. "You'll find water at the stream yonder, and food if you're willing to share your story." Joaquin nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Fair enough, senor. A story for a meal." The dinner that evening, under the stars, Diego and Joaquin sat by a campfire near the Kern River. Diego served fresh tortillas and roasted meat, while Joaquin shared tales of his life. He spoke of his family's migration to California during the gold rush, of the injustices they had suffered at the hands of miners and vigilantes, and of the brutal murder of his wife Rosita, which had set him on the path of revenge. "I did not choose this life," Joaquin said, his voice low but firm. "It was chosen for me when they took everything I loved. Now, I fight for what is ours for the people they would see erased from this land." Diego listened in silence, his heart heavy with sympathy. Though their paths were different, he saw in Joaquin a reflection of his own struggles. Both men were fighting to protect what they loved from the encroaching greed and cruelty of the new settlers. A bond forged as the night deepened. The conversation turned to the future. "This land is worth fighting for," Joaquin said, gesturing to the vast plains stretching out under the moonlight. "But it is a battle we cannot win alone. You have a good heart, Diego Alvarez, and a strong will. Men like you are rare." Diego shook his head. "I am no outlaw, Joaquin. I fight my battles with honor, not with bloodshed." Joaquin's gaze was steady. "Honor is a fine thing, Diego, but it is no shield against a blade. When the time comes, and it will come, you may find that honor alone cannot protect your land." Though they were men of different creeds, there was mutual respect between them. Before Joaquin and his men rode out the next morning, he left Diego with a small token, a silver medallion engraved with the image of a rearing horse. "If ever you need help," Joaquin said, "show this to anyone loyal to me. You'll find allies in the unlikeliest of places." The lasting impact, Diego kept the medallion hidden in his home, not knowing if or when he would ever use it. Though he respected Joaquin, he still believed in facing his battles alone, relying on his own strength and honor. When Elias Massey Caffrey arrived months later to seize Rancho Esperanza, Diego thought briefly of Joaquin's words and the medallion. But his pride held him back from calling on allies. He chose to confront M.C. Caffrey alone, a decision that would ultimately seal his fate. Joaquin Murrieta's legacy years later, after Diego's death, rumors spread that Joaquin Murrieta had avenged the wrong done to his old acquaintance. Some said that May Caffrey met his end at the hands of Joaquin's men, his ill-gotten fortune redistributed to those he had wronged. Whether true or not, the legend of Joaquin Murrieta became intertwined with the story of Diego Alvarez. Even today, some say that if you find the silver medallion bearing the image of the rearing horse, it will lead you to allies who still honor the memory of Joaquin Murrieta and the fight for justice in a land shaped by struggle and survival. Diego Alvarez, Joaquin Murrieta, and the mysterious Zorro. It was a moonless night in the autumn of 1852 when fate brought three legendary figures together in the shadowy expanse of the San Brad. Joaquin Valley. Diego Alvarez, the proud and steadfast rancher Joaquin Murrieta, the enigmatic outlaw seeking justice, and Zorro, the masked avenger who was whispered of in tales across Alta California. A meeting of circumstance, Diego Alvarez had spent the day in Bakersfield, purchasing supplies for his rancho. The ride back home was long, and the weight of growing tensions with Elias M.C. Caffrey's men pressed heavily on his mind. As the stars began to flicker in the deepening night, he noticed something unusual on the horizon, the campfire glowing like a beacon in the valley. Curious and wary, Diego approached cautiously, his pistol tucked into his saddle holster. As he neared, the sound of low voices reached his ears, and he recognized one of them immediately. Joaquin Murrieta, Diego called out, his tone neutral. The outlaw rose from the fire, a grin spreading across his face. Señor Alvarez, it seems our paths cross again. Come, sit. There is always room for a friend. Diego dismounted, his unease melting into camaraderie as he saw the familiar face of Joaquin. But his attention was quickly drawn to another figure sitting at the fire. The stranger was dressed entirely in black, a wide-brimmed hat shading his face, and a flowing cape draped over his shoulders. Across his chest glinted the polished hilt of a sword. Most striking of all was the mask that obscured the upper half of his face, leaving only his piercing eyes visible. "Who is this?" Diego asked, his voice edged with curiosity. The stranger inclined his head in greeting. "You may call me Zorro," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "A traveler, like yourselves, though my travels often involve matters of justice." A common cause, as the three men sat around the fire, stories were exchanged. Diego shared his plight with Elias M.C. Caffrey, the wealthy rancher who had stolen his land through fraud and intimidation. Joaquin spoke of his ongoing struggle to defend Mexican settlers from the injustices of the new regime. Zorro listened intently, his gloved hand resting on the hilt of his sword. When the others finished, he spoke. "Your struggles are not isolated," Zorro said. "The greed and corruption of men like M.C. Caffrey poison this land. But they can be stopped, not with brute force alone, but with strategy, precision, and the courage to act when others will not." Joaquin smirked. You I am, Zorro replied, "and it seems fate has brought us together for a reason. Perhaps we can combine our efforts." A night of action. That very night, the three men decided to confront M.C. Caffrey's men, who were known to patrol the outskirts of Bakersfield, intimidating locals and stealing livestock. Zorro devised the plan, Joaquin provided the firepower with his men, and Diego, though reluctant to act outside the law, agreed to guide them through the terrain. Under the cover of darkness, they rode to a small outpost where M.C. Caffrey's men had set up camp. Zorro moved like a shadow, using his sword to disarm and disable guards without spilling blood. Joaquin and his men struck with quick, calculated attacks, their pistols and lassos subduing the others. Diego, though unaccustomed to such tactics, proved invaluable in leading the group through hidden paths and away from detection. Quote, "By dawn, M.C. Caffrey's men had been thoroughly routed, their stolen cattle returned to their rightful owners." Before parting ways, Zorro etched a single Z into the wooden signpost near the outpost's silent declaration that justice had been served. Parting words as the sun rose, the three men stood at the edge of the valley, their horses ready for the journey ahead. "You are both men of honor," Zorro said, looking first at Joaquin, then at Diego. "Though the paths you walk are different, your goals align. Remember this: strength comes not just from the sword, but from unity." Joaquin nodded, a rare look of solemnity crossing his face. "We will meet again, Masked One, and perhaps together we will finish what we have started." Diego, clutching the reins of his horse, felt a sense of purpose he hadn't known in years. "Thank you, Zorro. You have shown me that justice can take many forms." With a flourish of his cape, Zorro mounted his horse. "Ride with courage, my friends. The fight for justice is far from over." And with that, he galloped away into the horizon, a lone figure disappearing into the golden light of morning. The legend grows, the encounter became the stuff of legend, whispered in hushed tones by those who heard of it. Some said the three men were destined to meet, brought together by forces greater than themselves. Others claimed the meeting was a mere coincidence, a fleeting moment in the ever-changing tapestry of California's history. But for Diego Alvarez, Joaquin Murrieta, and Zorro, it was a night that would never be forgotten, a moment when three paths converged, and the fight for justice burned brighter than ever under the California stars.